This is the Louie T Network.
Man, I love some football. Man, I love some football. My favorite week is week 1, cause I'm watching football. But first comes the preseason, and I don't take a day off. And then it gets even better when your team makes the playoffs. 32 teams go hard for one thing. They work for one thing. That Super Bowl ring. 32 teams go hard for one thing. They work for one thing. That Super Bowl ring. We in the lab room.
Exclusive.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me in the lab room exclusive. Percival Harvin is a Jet. Where did this come from? Nobody saw this coming. I didn't even hear rumblings or grumblings that this could be on the horizon. Maybe Seahawks fans maybe had an inkling about this, but I was in the dark. I had no clue that this was coming, and by listening to all of the talking heads and all of the insiders, nobody saw this one coming. So this is a huge surprise, but you know what's not very shocking to me? The fact that the Seattle Seahawks would want to part with Percival Harvin. I'll get to that a little bit later on, but just want to break some things down and talk about this trade and the impact that it's going to have, who's the winner, who's the loser in all of this. Percival Harvin is now a Jet, traded for a conditional mid-round selection, which means anywhere from a second to a fourth round selection is going to be slid the way of the Seattle Seahawks in exchange for the services of course, Percy Harvin. So Jets only having to give up a second, third, or fourth round pick for a guy that is a supreme athlete. And what that says is the Jets wanted this guy and didn't have to give up a lot for him. So that tells me that the Seattle Seahawks really wanted to rid themselves of Percival Harvin. And while we're on that subject matter, let's go to what went wrong in Seattle with Percival Harvin. So the first thing that jumps off the page at you is the money. Here's a situation where the productivity, and I'll get to that in a second, doesn't quite match up with how much money he is being paid. Keep in mind, he got a huge signing bonus from this Seattle Seahawks organization that gave up a boatload of picks. They swapped ones with Minnesota and gave up a couple of deuces. So there were a number of things involved in getting him to Seattle. They thought they were getting one thing. They ended up getting something else. And so the money right now, he's due $10 million per over the next few years. Now, none of this money is guaranteed, but again, if he's on the roster, he'll be paid his money. So the Seahawks saw fit, hey, we've got a lot of young guys on this roster. Russell Wilson is the most notable that we're going to have to pay. So might as well cut our losses now. And that's what the smart teams do. I always talk about men having the ability, and the strongest men, the most strong-minded men are the ones that can admit they made a mistake and move on. The worst thing you can do as a man is try to cover up or circumvent a mistake and exacerbate the problem. When you make a mistake, say, hey, I made a mistake. That's my fault. Fix it. That's what the Seahawks are doing here. And so that was one of the things that was wrong with Percival Harvin in Seattle. The next thing, is he a locker room distraction? I don't have the answer to that. We know that he was a problem in Minnesota. He actually asked for his trade in Minnesota. So he was a problem in Minnesota. There's no doubt about that. Didn't get along with Christian Ponder. All of those things have been well documented. We already knew about those things when he was going to Seattle. However, I don't know if there's any locker room distraction. I will say this much, and I've talked about this with Percy Harvin as a Seattle Seahawks. As a matter of fact, I talked about Percy Harvin and his role on this team and how I felt like he had regressed as a player. As a matter of fact, this is what I said on my breakdown of the Cowboys-Seahawks game on Monday. Check it out. 10 carries, 61 yards, not enough touches for your best football player. And I just said that. Your most consistent football player is Marshawn Lynch. And you could tell me it's Russell Wilson. I'd listen to you. You want to tell me it's Percival? I won't listen to you. He's a one-trick pony. And I hate the fact that he's in Seattle now because he won't grow as a football player in Seattle. He was starting to develop as a receiver and a guy that you could do multiple things with, but he was starting to grow as a receiver. They were running different routes with him, drag routes, slant routes, comebacks, deep routes, post, deep post. He was running almost the whole entire route tree. It wasn't the whole route tree. He wasn't running dig routes and things of that nature, but he was almost running the entire route tree his last year in Minnesota. He comes to Seattle, and now they've put him in a box. They've taken him back to the most elementary and basic of fundamentals of the game. They're not allowing him to do anything. Everything is at the line of scrimmage. It's a screen. It's a bubble screen. It's a hitch. It's him in the backfield on a jet sweep. It's him in the backfield catching a pitch. They're handing him the football out of the backfield. Nothing is down the field, allowing him to utilize his speed. Nothing is him developing as a receiver. Everything is short. So your best player, to me, offensively, most consistent, definitely by far, Marshawn Lynch. So as you can see, I feel like as a player, he had regressed because of what the Seattle Seahawks were asking him to do. And because his role had diminished, because they weren't giving him the opportunity to flourish as a receiver, because they had put him in a box, because of those things, maybe he wasn't happy. Maybe he wanted a bigger role in the offense. Maybe he was starting to spout off in the locker room behind the scenes. Maybe he was starting to become a malcontent. And if you're a Super Bowl champion team like the Seattle Seahawks, and a lot of the damage they did last year without Percy Harvin, keep in mind, he's only played in 8 games for this Seattle Seahawks team. So it's not like they're trading away a guy that is invaluable to this team, that you can't believe they're getting rid of him because he's such a big part of your offense. That's not the case. In fact, 133 receiving yards, 92 rushing yards, 38 snaps per game on average, which equals out to 60% of the Seattle Seahawks snaps, which is not a lot. So there's not a lot of production here from Percy Harvin. A lot of his catches, he had 22 catches on the season. 11 of those were either at or behind the line of scrimmage. So he had the worst average of any receiver in the league with over 20 catches for yards per catch. A shade over 6 yards per grab. Again, one of the worst, if not the worst in the league. So it's not like this guy was a huge part of what they were doing, but I don't like the way he was being utilized. I don't think he liked the way he was being utilized. So he could have been a distraction in the locker room. Don't really know the answer to that, but those are all the things that went wrong in Seattle. So now you go to the Jets and you look at it from their perspective. What are they getting? What are the Jets getting? What does this trade mean for the New York Jets? They're getting a supreme athlete and playmaker, which is 2 things that the Jets currently lack on their roster, especially at the wideout position. I think Eric Decker is a great acquisition for them. I think he's been the most sure-handed of all their receivers, but they still lack a guy that can take the top off the defense, that you're afraid of each and every single time he steps on the field. Other than Chris Johnson, when he's in the backfield, there's not a guy that you feel like is a home run threat on this Jets football team. Enter in Percy Harvin. He's going to change the game for the Jets. You look at another thing. They're going to use the hell out of him in New York. And I don't know if he was upset at the amount of workload he was getting in Seattle, but if he was, well, he's about to be a mule in the New York Jets offense because they're going to invent ways to use him. They're going to use him on wildcat. They're going to use him on read option. They're going to use him as a running back out of the backfield. They're going to use him on swing passes out of the backfield. They're going to use him on bubble screens, wide receiver screens, slot screens. They're going to use him on slant. They're going to actually use him as a receiver. Don't be surprised if he's running 9 routes, slants, comebacks, hitches, which is what the Seattle Seahawks failed to do with him in their offense. Everything was at or behind the line of scrimmage. They didn't allow him to grow and blossom as a receiver. I think he may get that opportunity in New York, among other things. They're going to use this guy in a multitude of ways, and he's going to feel like, damn, am I the only player on this team? They're going to use him to death in New York. Will help the Jets score more points. One of the Jets' Achilles heel this season has been the fact that they could move the football down the field but struggle to get in the end zone. We saw that on Thursday Night Football, having to settle for field goals time and time again in that football game. Their first 3 possessions all went right down the field, all ended in field goal attempts. Their first 4 scores of the game were all field goals. So if you are the Jets, you need to get in the end zone. We saw them lose against the Chicago Bears. Geno Smith takes the team all the way down the field, can't get in from the 5-yard line. They need help when they get into the red zone. He will help them get in the end zone more often. He's a dynamic playmaker, and he's going to help the running game out because anytime you get a guy on the field that's an explosive athlete that every time he's on the field, you got to know where he is and can take the top off the defense, it's going to have to keep safeties back, not allow you to bring 8 in the box necessarily. So, again, he's going to help this Jets team in a multitude of ways. So, it's a big move for the Jets, even though their season is this move isn't about this season. I hear everybody talking about how the Jets haven't given up on this year's season. That may be true, but this move isn't for 2014. I mean, he's under contract for at least the next 3 years. So this move is a big picture move in New York. They're looking to get better as a football team, and they're hoping that he can come in and help bolster their offense and give them a playmaker that they're lacking currently on their football team. So now you look at it from Percival's perspective. And right now, there's 2 things that stick out for me looking at it from Percival's perspective. And that's, he's going to get his money, so that's great. You're going to get paid, whereas with Seattle, that wasn't a guarantee. And that contract was one that the Seahawks felt like, hey, look, we're paying you all of this money, and we're paying you superstar money. We're paying you grade A, top choice, number 1 wide receiver money on the outside. And Percival was never that. And I said this last year that Percy Harvin isn't a number 1 receiver. And I said that the Seahawks are paying him as such, but they're going to find out he's not a number 1 receiver. He's never been in his career. He'll never be that, I don't think, in his career because of what he brings to the table. He's such a dynamic athlete that you're going to want to use him in a multitude of ways other than just lining up at the X or at the Y and having him win one-on-one matchups on the outside. You're going to want to move this guy around like a chess piece, so it's hard for him to be a number 1 wide receiver because he's not concentrating on that one craft. And I said that the Seattle Seahawks, I thought, were overpaying for what he could bring to the table. And they figured that out. They figured that out a little too late. Again, they've already paid him some money, but it's never too late to fix a mistake. And so they went ahead and said, you know what? We're paying you superstar money, but you're a role player. I talked about, 38 snaps on average per game for this guy. That's 60% of the snaps. You're talking about 133 receiving yards on 22 catches. You're talking about 92 rushing yards. Again, these are all mediocre numbers for a guy being paid superstar money. We don't want a role player for the type of money we're paying you. So the Seahawks said, hey, look, man, we have to cut our losses here and find a way. And really, for me, with the Seahawks, this means, look, we need to get back to who we are. And I thought that's what was one of the problems in that game. They lost their identity. They lost sight, and the 49ers are struggling with this, and I thought that the Seahawks were better than this. Don't struggle with who you are. You're a run-dominant football team. Marshawn Lynch, I don't know if he's having any injury issues. The back may be flaring up. I don't know, but that's not the problem. Even if he's dealing with an injury issue, ankle, a back, a knee, whatever, even if he's dealing with an injury, you still got other backs that you can hand the football to. So there's no excuse. You didn't run the football against Dallas, and that's a problem. And that's a mentality problem. You are supposed to be the team handling the other team at the line of scrimmage by bullying them and bludgeoning them to death with the running game, and you didn't do that against the Cowboys. You lost your identity. So getting rid of a guy like Percival Harvin, who maybe you feel compelled to get involved with the offense, maybe getting rid of a guy like that allows you to run the football more and get back to the basics in Seattle. But the other thing that this does, and is the way to look at it from the Percival perspective, is I'm losing in this trade. I am absolutely losing. I have just been downgraded from a Super Bowl champion team, and they're going to be a contender again this year, and a 3-2 record on the season, to a 1-6 basement dweller team in the AFC East. So right now, that's in the narrow focus, in the short term, I'm losing in this trade if I'm Percival Harvin. Big term, big picture, I'm getting my money, and hopefully I can help this team turn some things around and get better as an organization moving forward. So we'll see what happens. This trade is so convoluted. There's so many different angles to look at this from. All I know is the biggest winner in this trade is the Jets. The Jets absolutely win. They have money to spend. They feel like they're spending it wisely. They're getting a playmaker, an elite level athlete, a guy that can change the game, something that they currently don't have. The Jets win. The biggest loser in all of this is Percival Harvin, because yes, he's getting his money, but now he's on a losing football team. And for a guy that we've known in the past to be a malcontent because he was on losing football teams and wasn't happy with being on teams that weren't winning, well, you're going to a team that's already basically done this season. So how do you react to that? We will see. And the team that's just indifferent in all of this is the Seattle Seahawks, because I don't think he was a cancer necessarily, and I don't think that his impact on the team was great enough for you to feel like, oh, well, we're adding by subtraction here. It's not addition by subtraction, I don't think. I just feel like you were looking big picture. We're paying this guy all this money. He's not producing at the level and rate that we thought we were going to get out of him when we gave him all of this money. Let's just cut our losses and kind of go back to square one, which is running the football. And that's what I think this trade is all about. So if you ask me, Jets are the winner, Percival Harvin is the loser, and the Seahawks are just like, hey, we're done. We are done. And the fact that they are willing to take a second, third, or fourth round picks lets you know that they just wanted to go ahead and rid themselves of this situation. So that's the Percival Harvin trade in a nutshell. Would love to hear your feedback as to why you think this went down and how you think all of the parties involved, Seahawks, Jets, and Percival Harvin, are going to fare in this ordeal. That's going to do it. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the Lab Room. Come back and join me as I'll continue to break down the National Football League in all its splendor. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the football. See you next week.
In the Lab Room.
Exclusive.